succulent orchid pumpkin. This is something that I do every single year. It's pretty awesome. It's like a spin-off of the succulent pumpkin, but I'm also incorporating an orchid. And so we'll start with our materials. As far as materials go, you want to select a pumpkin first. And you can do this with all different kinds of pumpkins. I usually recommend that you get one that's a little bit inverted in the center, so that there's a little dip, because that's where you're going to place the base of your orchid. And also get one that doesn't have any puncture wounds, because that will dictate the life of your pumpkin. So because mold and water can penetrate that cut and cause your pumpkin to rot prematurely. And by selecting a pumpkin without a puncture, you are setting yourself up for success. So I've selected a pumpkin here with a dip in the middle, and I've selected my orchid. The reason that I select the smaller orchids is they've just worked better for me. I feel like the water requirements are lower, and I have done the larger orchids, and I've had a little bit of trouble with them. Feel free to try it if you like. But I feel like also the smaller orchid is more size proportionate to a pumpkin like this, and also can still give attention to the succulents as well by not being, so large that it like eclipses them. I usually look for a smaller orchid with a couple spikes and some buds so that you have a longer blooming cycle. Also, I look for one with a little bit smaller leaves, because I do want the succulents to be showcased as well. Another benefit of using the smaller orchid is that the container that it comes in is a lot smaller. And so what I do is, once I select my orchid, I remove the top lip, because I really don't want that plastic protruding from my succulent orchid pumpkin. So I've already started there. I just get a small pair of scissors, and I just cut around the edge on the top so that I can kind of expose some of that moss and some of those roots. There we go. Really, really easy to do. See, there we go. So once you've done that, your orchid is set to go. I'm just going to place that right back here in this container that it was in. And as far as your succulents go, so I went out and got mine from the garden. One that I really like to use a lot are aeoniums, because they just, throughout the year, if you grow this plant, they produce so many offsets of different sizes. You have like larger rosettes, and then the newer rosettes, as they appear, are smaller. So you have different sizes to work from. There are different kinds available. There's like purpley ones and green ones. They're a pretty awesome plant. There are echeverias as well that are really pretty. This like echeveria has like rosy tips on it. And this one also has rosy edges to the leaves, and it's more of like a blue-green color. This echeveria looks like a Q-tip. Pretty cool. I also like to use and incorporate succulent flowers. They will not last as long as your succulents, but it is a long-lived flower, so as long as you don't snap it, it's a beautiful flower and a fun thing to incorporate into your design. So what I do first is I go and select my succulents. I place them on a platter from largest to smallest, so that as I'm placing them, I can place them accordingly, and I don't have to dig through them to find a small one or to find, the medium one. They're kind of all in order from like largest, medium to smallest. And what I've done is, I've already done this, but when you go out to get your succulents in the garden, I just bring a bowl, one size, and a clean pair of pruning shears that have been disinfected, and I'll go and like harvest all my succulent cuttings. And then I'll go, and what you'll notice with aeoniums is a lot of like the under parts of it, they'll be like, dried leaves that they drop throughout the year, or they're just too far away from the rosette and you want the rosette to hug the pumpkin, so you'll cut some of the stem off. And I just put those in a bowl, and I've already done that here, so these succulents have already gone through them for the most part. I'm going to keep this bowl because I will be making more cuts as I go along to place the succulents around the orchid. Having a shorter orchid cup here makes it easier to mask the base of your orchid. So that's another benefit of having a smaller orchid to use on this. So I'm just going to place it here, and you want to have some hot glue. I've preheated it. Make sure to put it on a plate. Don't leave it on the counter, because once you heat your hot glue gun up, it drips hot glue If you have it on a plate, you can easily scrape it off once it's dried. Some people wear gloves, but I don't know. I don't really burn myself. So if you have gloves, cool. Feel free to use them. I feel like I can get into these grooves a lot easier with my hands, my bare hands. So it's just up to you. So yeah, here we go. So I start with the orchid. And I'll show you before I get this started exactly how to care for this, because it's kind of easy right now, because once I do this, the glue will need to set. But as far as care, you can give it like a light misting from the top over the next couple of months when you water your orchid. Just mist these like roots on the top by selecting orchid with like healthy aerial roots on the top. That's really fantastic. You can also just pull your orchid out. You can go run it under some water, put it in a bowl for a couple hours, come back, and then just place it back into the design. It's that easy. So here we go. So I'm selecting this part of the pumpkin to place this orchid. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do this I'm going to place the glue on the bottom of this base, because I really want the base, all edges of it, connecting with the pumpkin. So I just start like that, and I place it there. And then you can even go around a little bit, but be careful when you do this. Just go into some grooves where you see the pot touching the pumpkin, and then just put a little glue in there to kind of hold it in place. And there we are. What I've gathered here on this side as well is I have some moss and I have some rocks. I like to use rocks every now and then. It adds a nice earthy feel. And then the moss is nice because, it fills in cracks and crevices, and it looks lovely along with the succulents. So I'm just letting that dry for a second. And here we are. All right, so that's setting pretty well. So I'm going to move on to our moss, actually. Well, I'll move on to the succulents. So I'll start with the larger succulent because I really want to, mask the base of the orchid. So I just, hook that in there. If you can see, I just kind of went along the side of the pot, and there's my succulent. I have the stem here. The rosette will kind of hold the orchid in place from this side. So let's get that in there. And I just do like a long strip of hot melted glue on the side of the succulent, and then place it in there. I put the glue on the stem. I don't put the glue on the leaves. And so just go around in a circle. I'm gonna do another large succulent. Yeah, and see how these just cover that base right up. And if the stem is too long and you want it shorter, you can easily just like clean it up over here. And you kind of just go around like that. And you're going to use the smaller succulents and rocks and moss to fill this all in. So, and there's so many different ways to do this, and you don't have to do the orchid pumpkin. If you did want to just do a succulent pumpkin, this is generally the same way that you would do it. You can use succulent cuttings from your garden. You can go to the store and get succulent cuttings. If they're in dirt, you can pull the succulent out, remove the dirt, and just keep the very top part of the roots, and you can attach them that way. If you do spot mealybugs on any of the succulents that you use for this, I recommend discarding those succulent pieces. I mean, you could always try and rinse and clean them, but mealybugs are so good at hiding, and you don't want a single one on your plant because they could spread and prematurely cause your succulent pumpkin to wilt. So I'm right here, and what I'm doing is I'm just going along the side that I'm attaching to either the pot or the pumpkin. I'm gluing the side of that succulent piece. So here we go, right there. And I'm going to use another large one here. Oh, and sometimes you'll find little friends. There's a spider on this one. It's just a white orb spider, so no harm. I'm just going to shake him off into this pot. I can always let him go later. There you go, friend. So, all right. And so you just go around. And I really like to use aeoniums because I read a lot about them, and they appear to be one of your less toxic plants. That's not to say that an animal or pet isn't capable of choking on them. Um, but I've never had that problem. I don't hear about that happening. But, if you do have a pet that chews on your plants, be careful. I recommend to not ever use euphorbia. Like, do not use those. If you have them in your garden, that's great. They should stay in the garden and not on your pumpkin. And when you cut them, they're a sappy mess. So I would definitely not use those. And so, see, as you can see, I've kind of done a nice, beautiful base of succulents around the base of this orchid. It's all set up for success. So now we're just going to kind of fill it in with rocks and moss and smaller pieces of succulent. So what's nice is when you have these like smaller aeonium, it's kind of the way that they grow on the plant. So it shows a couple different stages of the plant while it's growing, which gives it a very, very natural feel. And then along with the moss, you can even glue moss directly to any succulent stem that you see exposed, because that's the part of the succulent that I glue this to. And then just any glue webs, just pull them off. You can always do that at the end as well. And just fill this in. And it's okay to like pull the leaves back and fill in certain places with moss that maybe you can perhaps see through. And these materials are so easy to find. So, and if you absolutely don't feel as though this is for you, your local nursery and there's certain stores, these have already been put, pre-assembled. I've never seen an orchid pumpkin anywhere aside from in my house. So you might have to make your own if you want an orchid pumpkin, but once again, succulents and orchids are not hard to find. You also might want to keep an eye out for some crassulas, because there are some toxicity rates that are variable amongst crassulas. I like to use jade, which is a type of crassula. It's often in front of a lot of people's homes. And usually jade, there's a lot of it. So when you cut it back, or you need it for filling, I actually have some here. So yeah, this is jade. So it's a great filler. As you can see, you can kind of like poke it in. It has a nice little stem that you can use to attach it to your pumpkin. By kind of manipulating the leaves, you close in a lot of those gaps, which is always really nice. Into some more succulents. This is a nice echeveria. And if you want to do this with your family or friends, succulent exchange parties are really fun. You can each bring like your own succulents to a gathering, and you could do this all together, which is a really, really fun way of doing this and bring in the holidays. This should last quite a long time. When I make these every year, they last the entire season. So they're pretty awesome. I mean, you have this lovely succulent orchid display for like 3 to 4 months. And stay tuned, I will be posting a video on how to plant your succulent pumpkin, because that is something that you will want to do at the end of the season, or once you're done with this. I recommend placing your succulent pumpkin or your succulent orchid pumpkin, either one. Being that it involves a pumpkin, at some point your pumpkin will begin to shrivel, it will rot, it's what fruit does. You know, if you have a fruit ball on the counter, eventually, like bananas and apples, like all the different ones, eventually will reach a point at which they start turning into mush. So be careful where you set your pumpkin. I recommend putting it on a charger or a large plate. Right here I have it on a granite countertop, so nothing's really going to happen, but you know, it does help to have a large charger. I unfortunately don't have one today, but I will be getting one for this particular design. Even your, if you do like a mini succulent pumpkin, you do want to place a charger saucer underneath it because it does take a lot longer to reach that like wilting stage. But once it does, you know, you've kind of forgotten about it because it's lasted so long and you've enjoyed it so much that, you know, this time comes to pot up the succulents, and you know the pumpkin starts wilting, and you don't want to be too late to that, especially if you have it like on a wooden coffee table or on a wooden table, or you know that the moldy juice that the pumpkin will eventually emit is something that you want to keep contained, and by using a large saucer, that is something that you can help use to avoid that. Okay, so I've got some succulents. I'm going to do some rocks. And I just kind of spin this around. If you have a little coaster that, you know, spins, those are super useful. I unfortunately don't have one, but I love them. I have used them before and they're fantastic for this, but this isn't really very difficult. So yeah, you're just gonna fill this in. And because the orchid is in the center, remember it's very easy to remove. So when you do need to water it, not a problem. See, this is not as hard as you thought it was. And sometimes you just have to hold them for a second. Oops, that one is. There we go. This is always so much fun. And since succulents come in all shapes and sizes, remember you can do this with almost any size pumpkin. I will be doing a video on just succulent pumpkins. I mean, like sizes of pumpkin like this or like this. You can even do the tiny pumpkins. There are tiny succulents out there to go on them. They make wonderful office buddies, like if you work at a desk job, or if you just want one at home, you know, next to your computer or dining room table. I still recommend getting a small saucer for each one that's size appropriate to the pumpkin. Do keep that in mind as well. These are more difficult to do orchids on because they're too small, so I wouldn't recommend these for orchid pumpkins, but these are excellent for succulent pumpkins. And hold on to this container because at the end of the season when you remove the orchid, if you do want to grow it, you can just put it right back in the pot that you initially bought it in. So pretty cool, full circle fun. Let me see. I love these little orbs. And right, and so in the winter, your orchid, you don't need to water it as much. So this is a very low maintenance design. As far as watering your orchid in the fall and winter, based on how cold your house is. If you have a very cold house, you will only need to water this plant like once every 3 weeks. And if the soil medium is not dry, then don't water it again until it does start to dry out. And then once again, you know, very easy. You can just I'm not going to pop it out now because it's still drying on the bottom, but super easy. Just pop the orchid out, kind of hold the plastic saucer in place, pull the orchid out. You can rinse it under water, or you can just get a spray bottle and spray it. Just don't water it too heavily if you're not going to remove it from the pumpkin because you don't want the water like draining all over the place. Anyways, that's, oh, and our succulent flowers. I forgot to use those. Okay, we're gonna use those. Here we go. And these are so fun. You can just like put them in anywhere really because they have a nice long stem. I'm just gonna put one there. And it's fun because you know it's also something that you see, whoops, sometimes hot glue will drip. It's easy to remove later though once it dries. Yeah, that's kind of fun because then it's like your succulents are blooming. Anyways, I'm gonna stop right here. Thank you so much for joining me today. And this is our succulent orchid pumpkin. This is a great holiday fall design that can last you from now, this is mid-September. This can last you up until Christmas, you know, and once your orchid flowers are spent, just cut them down to the base. You'll still have the leaves here. You can fill it in with succulents or leave the orchid there until you're ready to repot your succulents. Please stay tuned for when I post a video on repotting your succulent cuttings from a succulent pumpkin. Do make sure that you keep your orchid pot so that you can, oh, there's our spider friend, keep your succulent orchid pot so you can use this later on. If you have any questions about creating your own succulent orchid pumpkin, please let me know in the comments below. Please subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. My name's Jason. Thanks again.